Today, a Future Forward Misinformation Special Edition.
An epidemic of false media? Is it satire or strategy?
And who's fighting back? Can we stem the flood of information warfare?
I am Steven Rosenbaum, and this is Future Forward.
I'm Alexa Scordato. Let's launch.
Hey, Alexa.
Hey, Steve. So you picked this week's show, and I think it's kind of heavy and potentially depressing, and I don't know. We'll talk about it.
Yeah, and I don't feel that way at all, actually. I feel like the stories we pulled and the things we're going to talk about are actually, well, here's the thing I woke up thinking about this morning because I knew I was going to talk to you today. What are the things in the history of humankind that are extraordinarily powerful? Just made a list in my head. Fire, the wheel, right? The internet, a couple of medicine. So if you think about any of those big, amazing, kind of world-changing things, air travel, we could keep going, right? But the big, complicated, big things. Fire, fabulous, created cooking and warmth and all of these fabulous and then the ability to mold metal and all of these things also created arson and cigarette smoking and other so big world-changing innovation doesn't come without a price. The wheel, which I'm just going to jump forward to the car. If you look at the planet around us, the car was not a foregone conclusion that, human beings were not born thinking they were going to all have metal boxes they drove around in. Changed society, changed families, changed lifestyles, also murderous, terrible vehicles that people die in through alcohol and then sloppiness and then also rage where they drive them into. So with anything that's like big and world changing and human changing, there are going to be consequences, some of them predictable and wonderful, and some of them unforeseen and terrible. And I would put the internet squarely in that category.
I think that's fair. I guess when it comes to misinformation, we had the anniversary of the insurrection, January 6th, last week. And I guess maybe it's just too optimistic. Why is this so hard to solve?
Well, you got up on the wrong side of the bed this morning. It's funny. It's like you're usually the optimist on this podcast, and I'm usually the pessimist. Well, so we have a bunch of stories. Let's just peel the onion a little bit because I think it's a little like saying, why can't we cure cancer? We know it. Why can't we solve the common what is this thing we're trying to cure for? And they're different. We're going to talk about a couple of things. And I want to start with a good news story because I think this is an incredibly positive story and will lead to a more positive outcome for you at the end of this podcast. At least that's my
All
hope.
right. Take me on a journey, Steve. One headline at a time.
So let's just start with this decision by DirecTV to drop OAN.
Mm-hmm.
So, here's why. So probably all of our listeners have heard this already. I won't go into the details of it except to say DirecTV took a look at OAN, had a lot of pressure, and essentially said, this is not a news network. This is a propaganda network. They're purposefully and continually distributing misinformation, and we're taking them off our service.
Right. And DirecTV is a subsidiary of AT&T, right?
In fact, yes, it is.
Which is why it was a huge kerfluffle when it was revealed that AT&T had like a 70% stake or was basically responsible for 80% of funding for OAN.
So I'm not going to beat AT&T up for that. And I'll tell you why. When you're a big company and you're looking at a portfolio of 10 gabillion investments and somebody comes to you and says, listen, and there's a whole history with OAN, and they had a sports thing, and there was a whole bunch of different relationships, and they want to shift to a conservative, quote unquote, news network, and there's not enough balance. And I mean, I can see why an executive at AT&T said, listen, more voices are better. What's the downside? Sure, why not? And I'm not sure that OAN in its earliest incarnations was horrifically biased as it is now, but it is now horrific. And the fact that AT&T made the decision to drop it, I think, is the first blip in what is going to be a really good phenomenon, which is distributors, amplifiers of information, making careful judgments about what they amplify.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And
you're right, Steve. I am cranky this morning because I guess I just expect more, right? Like where it almost is like that should just be the general operating principles.
okay, but you've now worked for enough internet companies to know, and you've been in enough meetings where people say this thing we have that has happened here needs to be fixed. And there's like when you push the button to fix something, there's always going to be some series of other outcomes. So, but by way of example, one of my pet peeves, and you've heard me say this on the pod before, is I don't have any problem with Fox existing. I
Mm-hmm.
have a problem with the label that they have claimed for themselves and that amplifiers have willingly allowed them to claim, which is news. And I believe, and this is not me speaking on behalf of any organization I'm involved with. This is just me speaking as Steve, that if the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, MSNBC, CNN, Reuters, the Associated Press, and all the various other large media organizations got together, they could agree on a fairly short list of checkbox items that they all agree are essential for news. And they wouldn't be Democrat or Republican, independent, libertarian. They would be facts are broadcast, facts are checked. If there's a mistake made, a retraction is like certain kinds of behaviors that the Wall Street Journal, that news organizations from across the landscape would agree are news.
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe Fox could check those boxes.
Yeah. Okay.
And that would beg the question, if you're a cable distributor, of why you take $2 out of my monthly check that I write to you and give it to Fox because it's a news organization, when I believe by any reasonable measure it is not.
Yeah.
And I think this OAN DirecTV blip is the beginning of that phenomenon. So
Right. Okay.
So
then
yay.
we still have a long way to go,
All
as
right.
evidenced by the next headline, right?
The Joe Rogan headline.
Yeah. So Joe Rogan is on Spotify, and there is a group of physicians, 270 physicians and scientists, who are basically petitioning to have him not on Spotify.
So I'm going to close my eyes and be in the meeting at Spotify. The question is, if you let a group of lobbyists determine who should or should not be on your service, does that not potentially? I mean, I hear the free speech argument, which is, A, we pay Joe Rogan a boatload of money. B, he's wildly popular.
Mm-hmm.
C, we may or may not agree with him, but free speech, etc.
Yeah. I mean, I think, again, this is like very extreme analogy. If I'm hosting a party and I know that one of the guests at the party like verbally assaults his girlfriend, I have a choice. I can kick that person out, or I can say, not at my party. Right? But the moment he starts mouthing off at his girlfriend in front of my guests, I feel like I have an obligation as the host to address it. So I think in this case, Spotify needs to have guidance around the content that it's distributing.
So I completely, totally, and utterly disagree with you.
Why?
Because you've completely disempowered the woman in that equation. You're saying that you get to make the judgment about the fact that the behavior between the two of them is injurious to her, without her saying, I feel injured by this, or what if that's their relationship? What if they argue? What if their relationship is
Like,
if
I'll give you an example. Like, I don't sponsor, like a marketer, I don't sponsor or attend tech conferences that don't have a code of conduct because
totally agree with that.
right. So I think there, as a host or whatever, like there's a code of conduct, and you know, assault, whatever, I don't stand for it.
Well, verbal assault is an interesting phrase. We could go down a rabbit hole here, but
But anyway, I'm just saying, using that as an
but
example where
hold on. So your party has a code of conduct, and you send it out in advance?
maybe it's not formal, like I'm telling guests like sign this thing, but I'm just saying I feel like I have an obligation, right? Substitute host for platform, and I think there's an obligation, right? So I'm not saying Spotify needs to make the choice, kick Joe Rogan off or have him on. I think they need to identify what is the equivalent of their code of conduct, their policy, and they need to make that transparent. So we're living in a pandemic and a public health crisis. The government is spending media to basically educate the public on the importance of vaccinations. And there's an individual who is actively uh, diminishing the importance of that, right? So,
Well, I mean, this is getting. Perhaps we'll go over our regular half hour today because there is a lot to cover here. I mean, you could argue that Joe Rogan just aligned himself with the Supreme Court. I mean, I thought the Supreme Court's ruling on OSHA was abhorrent. And I actually don't even, I mean, other than the pure politics of it, I couldn't understand. I mean, if you run a factory and OSHA comes in and says you need to upgrade the plastic shields in front of that blade, or OSHA does. Most people that have OSHA come in and tell them how to run their factory are fairly pissed off about it, right? I mean, nobody goes, "Oh yay, OSHA's here."
yeah. So, I mean, my point is not necessarily pro anti Joe Rogan, pro anti Spotify. Like the thing that I'm trying to get at is that any platform that hosts and amplifies content should have transparent codes of conduct or rules of engagement, or just a policy, right? That is transparent to the publishers and the listeners, so that is understood what the rules are.
Right. So the Rolling Stone article that we're reading, there's plenty of coverage of the Joe Rogan story, but we chose this one. The subhead is, unlike many platforms, Spotify doesn't have a clear policy prohibiting misinformation. Well, I get that. I mean, that's a decision they made. That's not an accident. It's not like, oops, we forgot to publish that. I mean, have you
Right. And so you can.
do you listen to Joe Rogan at all? Have you ever listened to him?
Mm-hmm.
I find him despicable, and I don't believe, unlike other people who I think spout misinformation. I think his core competency is controversy.
Mm-hmm.
That's what he's good at, and being on the opposite side of any issue is going to make his audience, fired up.
I mean, he is like the Facebook algorithm personified. The
Well,
more you can
so
really
good.
like poke and prod and flare up people's, negative emotions, the more popular you'll get.
He's a provocateur.
There you go.
All right. So Spotify is going to have to come up with an answer about the code of conduct thing. Let's move on, because we got a lot of these, and I think they're all different. This is Fox News host Dan Bongino being suspended from YouTube over COVID misinformation. So unlike Spotify, YouTube has a very clear code of conduct about medical misinformation.
Right. And they gave him the boot
for a week. Oh, very sad. For a week.
Yeah, but again, if their policy is sort of, okay, you're getting a warning, okay, you abuse that warning, now the action is you're getting banned, like a timeout, then, if he comes back and does it again, maybe he'll be off for good, right? Look at Donald Trump. He's not on Twitter still.
Um, you know, I guess I don't know. I just thought that you
I
have
mean,
to really
we
go.
can examine the different policies. So if the Spotify headline is sort of saying, "Hey, there should be a policy in place," what the policy is, I don't know if there's like a silver bullet or a golden standard on these policies, but I'm glad that they exist. I think there's a sense of like entitlement or a lack of accountability that is pervasive amongst leaders in the world, and people just think they're above it. So even if it's a little slap on the wrist, a weekly suspension, I'd rather see that than nothing at all.
Okay, so you're saying yay to YouTube. They although I have a feeling that I can't even pronounce his last name, Bongino. I have a feeling that Dan Bongino doesn't generate a gabillion dollars for YouTube in the way that Joe Rogan cost and then generates a gabillion dollars for Spotify. But let's so we'll put this in the so just to be clear, because I want to leave this podcast with you more cheered up than you came in. OAN, good
Win.
news, win. YouTube, good news, win.
Mm-hmm.
People, 370 doctors speaking out and pressuring Spotify to pay attention. Potential step in the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so let's see if we can find some more good news. So this is the Newsweek article about Rand Paul.
Oh, this one like kind of blew me away. Not blew me away in the sense I was like surprised, but just this video existing, I was like, oh my God, like huge. My eyes rolled all the way to the back of my head.
And I thought that his spokesperson's answer was
Mm-hmm.
fascinating.
Yeah. So those of you who are listening, there's a video that surfaced from Rand Paul back in 2013 where he addressed a group of medical students and basically said that misinformation is a useful tactic. And so, for example, when he was a student, he would see himself as competitive with other students. And so he would perpetuate or start rumors about what exam content would contain so that students he was competitive with would study the wrong topics.
So did I miss the chapter in med school where there were 100 students in a class and only the top 20 got degrees? Was it? I didn't realize it was a zero-sum game in getting your medical degree, that you had to actually damage other students' grades in order to improve your own. Instead of
I thought it
grading
was
on a
mostly like pass fail, unless he was, yeah.
so he was trying to damage other
No, but
students'
he's
grades.
not a med student.
Well,
He's
he's an
saying,
ophthalmologist, which comes
oh,
after an
right. Yeah.
MD. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. No, but like, so he was already trying to damage other doctors' grades to improve his own so that he could be at the top of his class and graduate as an award-winning ophthalmologist. That,
Yeah.
um, you know, it's just, and by the way, easy to forget Rand Paul is the son of Ron Paul.
Mm-hmm.
Where is Ron?
I don't
He
know.
didn't die, did he? He didn't die.
No, I don't think so.
But like, is dad proud of young son Rand? Is
I
Rand
don't.
living in dad's political shadow?
Who knows? But either way, this video surfacing, existing. I mean, it shows like a clear through line. Like some people, their character integrity is just like it doesn't
But
change.
but here's why this is an important clip and why I pulled it to take our conversation forward. Um, the question is misinformation? Do people who are misinforming other people genuinely believe they're telling the truth, or is it a strategy? Is it a we'll win by making other people lose strategy? And I think if you read,
Strategy.
yeah,
Bannon even said that too.
yeah, and
Trump's political advisor.
if you look at Rand's spokesperson's answer, he's like, if you look at the tape, it's clear that Rand was making a joke.
Mm-hmm.
I got to tell you, I'm not sure I want a jokey doctor in my life.
No, and I think again, it's like when you look at why I think the Republican Party has been so successful is that they've flooded sort of the communication airwaves or streams with so much content that is contradictory, sarcastic, put air quote humorous, and it confuses the general public. And where I think Democrats have really failed from a communication strategy is that they kind of feed into it where they respond to the complexity of messages instead of really simplify and clarify the things that they stand for and believe in.
No,
So the American public is just overwhelmed and bombarded.
so I thought that the first attempt of Biden to play by those rules was using the word loser in reference to Donald Trump multiple times in that speech he gave last week, because it was definitely meant to get under his skin. It was like, nah, nah, nah. But here's, I totally agree that the strategy is, what is Bannon, what is the Bannon quote? Flood the zone with shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're winning that battle. The zone has been flooded with shit. But I think technology can solve for that. I mean, I'll just give you an example. I'm really sorry Betty White died. Wonderful woman, good comedian. I needed to know that one time. If you want to go nuts, you could tell me that story twice. I probably got told Betty White died 700 times.
Yep.
That's a technology problem. Once I've acknowledged the story and I've gotten the news alert, and I'd like to be able to say to my various networks that I am subscriber of, thank you very much, got it. Don't when the person comes to deliver my dinner at the door, they don't need to ring the doorbell 300 times.
Okay, so Steve, what you're saying though is like why I'm kind of salty, right? Because you're actually saying like this is a tech problem. We should be able to fix it in zeros and ones. It's all just code.
Yep.
Right. And I guess for me, I'm frustrated at people because you're saying, why did I hear Betty White died 700 times? I'm sort of like, Steve, did you go to middle school and high school? Do you not remember how conversations like transpired socially amongst the hallways and lunch tables? Like if someone was wearing like the cool new sneakers or someone was broke up with so and so, I heard that 700 times.
Okay, different though. I'm not talking about social networks. I'm not talking about people republishing things in there. I'm talking about, anyway, we'll put my little gripe about news multiple hits aside, because we got a bunch more articles that I think take us in the right direction. So now let's get to this Joe Biden deadline headline. Joe Biden calls on media outlets to curb COVID misinformation. Quote, it has to stop. Does anyone in our audience want to disagree with that? I mean, yes, COVID misinformation, dangerous and bad, people are dying.
I know, but you have a lot of people who just don't think COVID is anything, doesn't exist. It's a flu. It's,
I think the data rather clearly, plays against that.
That data is a sham, Steve. The numbers are fake.
Alexa Scordato quote, the data is a sham, the numbers are fake. I could put that out on Twitter right now. And it would be accurate.
The numbers are inflated. They came from untrustworthy sources. I mean, that's why I'm saying like this, all of this is so complicated. And again, where I just woke up on the wrong side of the bed. It's just when it comes specifically to misinformation around the pandemic, like we've been living in this for 2 years now.
All right, so let's keep going. Good news. I'm going to just keep counting up good news.
Okay.
Keep
counting up good
OAN
news.
good news. The Spotify pressure campaign, good news. There was another bit of good news. DirecTV, good news. The Fox News, the YouTube, good news. Joe Biden being clear, good news. Then there's a group of fact checkers that are gathering together to put pressure on YouTube, saying that essentially YouTube has to step up its misinformation filters. Good news. Fact checkers, good news. I'm not sure this is good news necessarily.
Oh, this is bad news.
This is bad news. So Facebook hosted surge of misinformation and insurrection threats leading
Like
up to January 6th.
hundreds of thousands, like 10,000 posts per day.
All right. So, let's write a line of code, you and I. So we go to our CTO and we say, here's an article on our network, on our platform that it has misinformation in it. Here, the keyword is COVID and not serious, COVID something. Like, what are the posts we take down, and what do we put in our algorithm to stop them? Why is this simple? How do we do it?
I mean, I'm sure there's like a cluster of words, whether it was like images of civil war imagery, storm, capital, like voter fraud, whatever. Like the whole cluster of things. So rather than do nothing and basically just easy pass all of the conversations, you write a line of code that flags the content, flags the group, notifies the moderator, just to say, like, your group or forum, whatever, is under review. And you slow it down. You don't necessarily take it down, you slow it down.
So
you lock it. Like, I don't know if you've ever moderated a forum, but like, it's not even new technology. Like, moderators just need time to lock the forum.
And you reopen it, say, on January 7th.
Yeah, like, again, like, if you look at a big platform, like I just listened to this podcast with Brian Chesky, co-founder and CEO of Airbnb. And Airbnb is a huge global platform. Why were they in a position where they literally saw people booking hotels in the Washington, D.C. metro area and then stopped it? They literally prevented people who were going to participate on January 6th from using their platform.
Yeah. So at the risk of being on the wrong side of justice, I'm not sure I like that answer. I mean, what if they were going to hear a speech from the outgoing president of the United States? Why do you think people going to Washington to a conference that is a conference?
Because they had enough evidence after looking at the nature of the content to say this could be really bad. And even if there are edge cases where there's no ill intent, we have to make a policy that prevents this.
Wow.
And they issued refunds. They took the hit. And it's not like those people were suspended from Airbnb. They could have pushed their Washington, D.C. field trip plans back a day or two. It was just that no one was going to be allowed to book on Airbnb.
I did not know that. That's fascinating.
And that's, like, for me, brave, courageous leadership with integrity. And it was solved through technology.
So the only reason I disagree with you there, and I didn't think I was going to disagree with you, is, while, for example, Facebook and YouTube and Twitter and Reddit all had the conversation, and Gab and all the various other platforms had the information that people were talking about bringing guns and danger and all these things. What did Airbnb did Airbnb see people searching for? I want an apartment with a gun locker. I mean, they
had the hosts who are engaging or receiving comments from the people who want to stay in their homes, like, what brings you to town?
And they said, we want to take over the federal government.
I guess in some cases, yes, but like they had also experienced this precedent. It was not their first rodeo. The was it there were the other there what event was it? The protests in Charlottesville?
Yep.
They also did something like this.
But different, because that was called Unite the Right.
No. What happened? And I think what happened was they didn't have a policy. That was the first time they had experienced it, and so they actually learned from that event.
Okay. All right. So we got two more articles and then we're going to run out of time. So this is in WCIA.com, and this is Rumble uses GOP megadonor Ken Griffin's financial backing to spread misinformation on vaccines in the election.
Okay, so explain to what Rumble is.
Rumble is, as the larger platforms have become more responsible and tried to shut down misinformation, a bunch of hard right-wing radicalized private secure networks have spun up. So Rumble, Gab, there's a bunch of them. Yep. But I don't know who Ken Griffin is. I've never heard of him.
Yeah.
GOP mega donor.
Yeah, I think he is associated with, was it Citadel Capital, some hedge fund in Chicago? Anyway, they funded the platform.
I mean, I guess I just don't understand. Now I'm going to turn over to your side of the conversation. I guess I just don't understand how right-wing, quote, conservative values have become kind of inexorably linked to medical denialism. I don't understand how that's a conservative position.
Because it's like, don't tell me what to do. Don't limit my freedom.
Yeah, all right. That's the subject of another podcast, because we got two more links. So this is actually, I think, where things are going, right? So the January 6th Commission has subpoenaed the four big tech firms. So they've subpoenaed Alphabet, Meta, Reddit, and Twitter.
Alphabet,
and I love that Reddit
Google,
is now
Meta is Facebook.
Yeah. And I love that Reddit is on that list, because I've been lobbying for them to be looked at that way.
I mean, you've been pissed off about the Donald subreddit since it existed. So
I'm not pissed off, just concerned about its, basically monetizing hate. Anyway, so I think these subpoenas are interesting, in part because, unlike the politicos who are just going to ignore subpoenas, I'm not really sure that big platforms can just simply ignore subpoenas. I think they have to show up.
Yeah.
And I think that this could be an incredibly interesting conversation. Like, when did you know, and what did you know, and what did you do about it?
Yep.
All right. Well, we're unfortunately out of time. All right. So I'm going to try and summarize. I'm going to go back to the beginning of the pod and try and summarize. We've invented this amazing, by the way, the internet is how old, for those of us paying attention at home? 20 years, thereabouts. Mm-hmm. So it's a baby. We invented fire. We invented nuclear power. We invented the wheel. We invented the printing press. We invented this amazingly powerful thing, and we set it out with very few guardrails to be played with. And some people with, malicious intent have gotten ahead of the slower moving, more moderate folks. And I don't believe that that's the end of the road. I believe that, we're not going to solve this with a silver bullet, but I think, it's going to be a combination of behavior, good nature, technology. I'll close with this one thought. There's a philosopher named David Chalmers, who's quite brilliant and interesting, and writes a lot about technology and the metaverse. And his quote from last week was, it's hard to look forward to a world in which we're in the metaverse and take on this dystopian view of the future. He's like, people are going to be what they're going to be. And much like they do bad things and kill each other and rape and murder and speak ill of each other in the public, they will do the same bad things in the metaverse, but there will also be as people who will do good things. And I think that we need to find ways to amplify the positive voices so that the crime and mayhem stories don't kind of flood the zone.
I agree.
And I think that's doable. And I'm optimistic.
Okay, I'll give you this. I'm optimistic too. I'm just impatient because I think we can do better and should move faster. And the lack of action is having really seismic consequences on society.
So I love you for saying that. And I'm proud to know you. And I think that you should make sure that you say that to all of your friends who are in positions of power and influence, because you have an enormous network of people that take you quite seriously. And I think that collectively, that's a good call to action. That's the right thing to say to people that are, that are on the driving on the wheel of the internet, that are like steering the boat, because you can't do it alone.
Yep.
All right. Next week we'll do candy. No, we'll do collectible dolls. We'll do something lighthearted. Okay. All right, everybody. Have a good week.
See you.
Bye.